two different places. There we go. I think we are live, even though that was chaotic for a second. Well, thanks guys for being with me. I really appreciate you guys coming out and talking about what we're going to discuss today. And I was really motivated by your courage
Thank you.
last night because so for people who are listening, people who are typically, if you're listening to Ripple Effect podcast, we're talking about geopolitics, we're talking about history, we're talking about things that are going on all over the world. One common theme that we discuss from time to time is how we should be active locally. And a lot of times small town politics isn't something that interests me too much. There's a lot of infighting and that and this and who you know and all this stuff, and I'm just like, that's not. I'm like, I kind of want to just enjoy my life and not. And I'm a part of the community. I'm everywhere, so I try to, I go to the local butcher shops, restaurants. People know me. I'm Portuguese, and if you're Portuguese or Polish in town, you're well known in the community. And I think it's good not to get involved in any internal conflicts, at least for me. But now it's gone to a point where, just like I always say about politics, as much as I hate politics, you can hate it, you can ignore it, but eventually it'll have effect on your life, and it should motivate you to get involved. And so yesterday we had a Ludlow. For people who are regulars to this podcast, they know that I live in Ludlow, Massachusetts, kind of western central Massachusetts, and we had a school committee meeting yesterday, which I kind of found out last second. I already had a packed schedule for this week, so I was like, oh crap, I gotta go to this thing, see what the hell's going on. I had a little bit of hope because other towns locally, friends of mine that live in East Long Meadow and stuff, they were sending me articles about how they had optional masks for children going back to school. So I'm like, okay, this is good. Maybe this is a good sign. I didn't know anybody on the committee. I knew one guy, Chip, that's kind of the only person I knew. So I didn't know who was pushing for what, or if they'd be open to optional masks or whatnot. So we went there. Thanks to the amazing people like Louis, who's with me today, and Alex, who are both from the town that I'm from. And by the way, Alex, don't be embarrassed to plug your show. You got a show, you podcast, plug away, my friend, when you get the chance. And they really impressed me. I actually knew Louis for a long time because my original co-host and Louis are very good friends. So if you guys have been listening for a long time, you might know Dave. Him and Louis are very close. But he went up and shared a very personal story that really tugged at many people's heartstrings. Alex went up and killed it. He did an amazing job. I was so happy to see a young person who isn't brainwashed and is a free thinker with critical thinking skills, and is willing to push back and go against the grain. That gave me a lot of hope. I honestly didn't know how the meeting was going to go, and if how many people there were going to be for or against. So I was very happy to see that there seemed to be more of us than them. And I think a lot of it's because we're passionate about these issues for different reasons. We're passionate about these issues because we understand the harm, we understand the danger, we understand these issues at a deeper level. We're looking at information, not to disrespect anybody, but I think when it seems like people who happen to have the stance that we have, they, just from all the experiences, I mean, I've done plenty of podcasts. I talk to people everywhere I go. If anybody knows me, or ask my wife, she gets mad at me all the time for going somewhere, and then next thing you know, I'm having a 1 hour conversation with somebody and neglecting her. So I talk to people all over the place, and it seems like people who have our stance are a little better research, have a little bit more information. They seem to be making more logical decisions on how they feel on these topics and less emotional decisions. A lot of people, like, they feel a certain way. I feel like I'm in danger. And yet we all understand the media is fear mongering. Every other segment on mainstream media is a big pharma commercial. What does that tell you? That tells you they have no incentive in giving you any information that would go against big pharma because they're paying their salary. So all these issues. But anyways, obviously, you know why I do a podcast, because I don't know when to shut the hell up. So I'm going to shut the hell up now and let you guys share some of your stories. I don't know, Alex, Louis, whoever wants to go first. If you guys want to share maybe a little bit of your background and what motivated you to, like myself, go there and share your personal opinions.
Alex, you want to go or you want me to take it?
You can take it first and then I'll go.
All right. So it was in '89 I started working in law enforcement, and I started at the old York Street Jail down in Springfield. And that was my first taste of being exposed to people with drug problems, mental health issues. I mean, I was really in my, like, maybe I was 20 years old when I was working there. And it opened my eyes to mental health issues, abuse, drug abuse, all kinds of things like that. And then I worked my way into being a police officer, and eventually I became the supervisor of a detective bureau in 2013. And my exposure to people with mental health issues and overdoses, and I think I mentioned it last night, I don't think there's anybody else in the town of Ludlow in the last 8 years that has been exposed to more death, mental health crisis. I can't tell you how many times we respond to a mental health crisis where somebody is either on an opiate issue, having an opiate issue, or an alcohol issue, in mental health in general. And right now, it's exacerbated by the fact that these people, these practitioners, the therapists, have no room to see anyone. So we have a mental health crisis that is skyrocketing, especially among young people. And I believe since 2015, it's been a 178% increase in suicides among kids from 10 to 14. Okay, so what I tried to convey last night is there are risks. There's risks that these kids are facing. There's dangers these kids are facing that make COVID microscopic on the scale of threats to their well-being. So responding to all these deaths, and I'll tell you one thing, when you sit in the room with the dead body of a 17-year-old kid and it's quiet and the kid is either committed suicide or overdosed, or sometimes suicide by overdose, which is unfortunately more common than you think. And there were times where we had 2 or 3 within a week. And as the detective supervisor, I would have to respond to all of these. I would have to be present. And I don't know if you know how it works, but you have to stay with that body until the medical examiner comes. So in the darkness of a room, or you're seated there in the basement with this kid, you have to retain custody. You have to stay in the room and you wait for the medical examiner to show up. And doing that repeatedly over and over through the years, I began to build an anger, some rage. Like, why is this happening? And why is no one doing anything about it? And ultimately, who's responsible for this? Who started this problem? And I started doing a lot more research. I started networking with people, and I got in touch with an author. His name is Robert Whitaker, and he wrote this book, Anatomy of an Epidemic. And there was another book, which I suggest anybody who's interested in understanding Big Pharma and its impact on humanity, Dreamland, which was an excellent book by Sam Quinones. As I did more research, what I started to find out was that doctors were prescribing OxyContin to anyone with pain. And the dirty secret here that people miss is that Big Pharma colluded with Purdue Pharma. I'm sorry, the government, the CDC, the FDA. They approved OxyContin after citing one single study in the New England Journal of Medicine called the Porter and Jicks study. Herschel Jicks was a doctor in Boston, and he was treating cancer patients in the hospital with OxyContin. And he wrote an op-ed piece to the New England Journal of Medicine. And in that op-ed piece, he said, these patients in the hospital, I don't see any signs of addiction or addictive behavior, something to that effect. That op-ed piece was picked up years later by the pharmaceutical industry, in particular Purdue Pharma. And what they did is they ran with that to every doctor they knew, and they ran with it to the FDA. And the FDA gave approval to OxyContin with the disclaimer that it is not addictive. Can you imagine? It's not addictive. And on the warning label, they put, do not crush this because it can increase the toxicity. Well, what does an addict want? They want the biggest bang for their buck and the hardest hit. And it was supposed to be a time-released formula at the time. So OxyContin hit the streets. OxyContin was the prescription that was given out everywhere. In fact, we had a doctor in Ludlow who was prosecuted. He was the second highest prescriber of OxyContin or painkillers in the state. And he was convicted for insurance fraud, and he was put away. So we had a serious problem in town. And every time I talk to an addict, and I'll tell you, there's a human level when you sit in the room with someone who's addicted to heroin, and you have people that will just wipe these people away as they're just losers, they're addicts, they're no good. Some of these were people that had knee injuries from BMX biking that were put on OxyContin. Some of them were great athletes that were put on it. It ruined their lives. And I can't tell you how many times an addict said to me, I would say, if we arrested them or we did something, we brought them in, I want to know your story, because it was bothering me that so many people were dying. And they would always say to me, I got on a prescription. When the prescriptions ran out, I ended up going to the heroin. And it's human tragedy on a scale that is unbelievable, but it's an epidemic that I blame Big Pharma and the government for, because they were in cahoots. And the FDA, the supervisor of that study that approved that study, became an employee of Purdue Pharma a few years later. And that's all listed in the books that I read. These are facts. So that study that was done innocuously by this doctor, and he wrote this piece to the New England Journal of Medicine. In that study, he said the time release methods of how this is delivered do not cause anyone to become addicted, and there's no sign of addiction. That study was done by people who were cancer patients in a hospital setting. It had no testing done on anyone in a house or in their private premises, which is obviously a problem. So when Big Pharma and the government got together and unleashed OxyContin on the world, on the United States, it killed a lot of people, and it is still killing people. And when COVID hit, that epidemic did not go away. It only got worse. So we're seeing far more opiate addictions, far more overdoses going on right now. And I didn't even touch suicide, which is another issue that oftentimes runs in tandem with opiate addiction. So I'm very passionate about mental health. And I think conveying that to the school committee last night was extremely important, that you not forget that there's a tragedy going on almost every day in this state alone, with heroin and opiate addiction. And it just seemed to me that the two words mental health haven't come out of their mouths. And when people like Alex, and I know other students, have gone before that school committee and said, listen, kids are struggling. They don't like this. They don't like to be behind a screen. They don't like to be behind a mask. It was like, well, you need to suck it up. You need to deal with it. Well, sucking it up and deal with it when there's no help out there, especially right now, there is no help. And I talk to mental health practitioners. It is a crisis that is being exacerbated. So their solution and their biggest fear seems to be only COVID. It's the only thing being talked about now. They're not putting numbers on the screen on ABC News or CNN of opiate addiction, of opiate addicts or overdoses and suicides. That's not on the screen. The only thing you see on the screen is COVID, COVID, COVID. And since January 1st, there hasn't been a single death in the Commonwealth of anyone under the age of 20, not one. So I'll give you the numbers on suicide and opiate if you want it, and it's going to dwarf that. So I'm not asking for you to ignore COVID. I'm just asking you to give some consideration to what the collateral damage you're doing with these restrictions and the masking. So that's basically my passion, is mental health and getting people help where there is none right now, and being concerned about them and showing them some empathy and compassion. I'm not one of these people that, oh, he must be a right-wing lunatic that's defying the science. Because I will talk science with you all day long. I'm not defying the science. And I'm just not buying the science that, especially a guy named Fauci, who's the richest man in government. Everyone seems to love Fauci that is pro-COVID. When Kerry Mullis, the guy who invented the PCR test, called him the biggest fraud out there. And when he wanted to debate him, Fauci refused. And unfortunately, we lost Kerry Mullis before the COVID thing hit, because I think he would have been a formidable voice that and there's another guy, Kerry Mullis. I read his book, his autobiography. he called Anthony Fauci a fraud, and the guy shouldn't be where he is because he's deceiving a lot of people. So, I mean, there's a lot to this. I'm not trying to start a civil war. I don't want that. I want to unite people rather than split us apart. But I don't think that, I think at this point it's inevitable now. We've reached the breaking point where I don't see anyone coming together on this issue. People have made up their minds. And that's a sad state we're in right now.
No, I was just going to add for people listening who might not know who Kerry is. He is the inventor of the PCR test, which has been misused and
there he is.
used in high cycles. Yeah, he's actually an interesting character, but using high cycles to get false positives. It was only after when they, things got better that they, or it was basically after the election sometime early this year when they started actually publicly saying they need to lower the cycle counts and they were possibly getting these false positives. I mean, that's the thing. Like a lot of these people who are online talking about science and talking about statistics. I've talked to I can name so many doctors that I've talked to. Dr. Joel Hirschhorn, who's actually, I think he's in his early 80s. He's been in the medical world forever. He wrote this book, Plandemic Blunder. And these people, a lot of these guys are PhDs. They write prescriptions. They study medicine. They're deep in the science. They're not in politics. They don't care. They're just stating what they're seeing and sharing what they're seeing, and their voices are being suppressed. And only in 2020 and 2021 has it become not okay for a doctor to look at information and come up with a different conclusion, because prior to all this, it was completely normal to get a second opinion, a third opinion. What does that mean? That means that you're looking at information, you're analyzing it, and you're coming up with a different conclusion, which is completely acceptable. But now we've decided that these people are truth with a capital T. Everybody else is pseudoscience. I've had Dr. Robert Malone on my show, talked to him for 2 hours on the Ripple Effect podcast. He's being suppressed everywhere, was kicked off LinkedIn. He's been called a right winger because he's only on right wing shows. Well, he said it on my show. The only reason I'm on right wing shows is because they're the only ones who will talk to me. Nobody else will talk to me. Nobody else will have me on. He's not a political guy. He's not a guy who really feels strong about any specific ideology. He's a science guy who's actually worked for. He's one of the inventors of the mRNA technology. So if his voice is invalid, who is? If he has concerns about what's going on, then same thing with Dr. Scott Jensen, another guy who's been on the show. Such an important voice. He was the first one to come out publicly and say, hey, these new CDC guidelines really make it blurry and really give you the opportunity to call a COVID death or a COVID death that's with the virus the same as by the virus. So it's like you're basically mixing the two numbers together, where if you just have it, they're calling it a COVID death. And it was happening over and over again. He was publicly talking out. This is a family physician. He was, I forget what year in Minnesota, physician of the year. He's a senator. I believe he's running for office again. And he's just an outspoken person, and these people are being suppressed over and over again. I talked to Dr. Jessica Rose from Israel. She talked about how Israel is the most vaccinated country in the world. 70, and she has a theory on it, which is actually pretty interesting. In Israel, because when bombs come, the government tells you run, and they actually come little by little. You're being conditioned to believe that the government's here to save us. They're here to protect us. So you get this kind of unrealistic confidence in your government. And so when they said go out and get the vaccine, everybody did. Well, now the most vaccinated country in the world, 79% of people that are hospitalized have been vaccinated. So those aren't things we're not talking about. When Fauci was on TV saying that Texas and Florida, because when they relieved the states of the mandates, that everybody was going to die and all these things were going to happen, that didn't happen. No, nobody wanted to report on Florida and Texas. Nobody said, hey, let's go there and see what's going on, because they relieved all the mandates, and yet nothing bad is happening. They only want to report on it on Florida and Texas when it helps their narrative. Now it's like, oh, are we hearing cases are going up? Oh, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Florida and Texas. It's ridiculous. And there's so many things we're going to and need to talk about, but Let me give Alex some time. Alex, can you get into a little bit of your background and what motivated you to go up there and speak?
So, I've been politically active for a few years now. I'm still 16, so I'm very young. I'm the political director for the Massachusetts Teenage Republicans. I have my own podcast, Blue to Red, which is live tonight at 9 p.m. on my YouTube channel. So I've been very passionate about, schools and COVID throughout the past year. I led a protest last year to get Ludlow Schools reopened. I'm not sure how big of an effect that had on the decision, but a few weeks after the protest, they did eventually reopen, and it was a good thing. And I felt, our students and our parents, quite frankly, for most of the kids in the district, should have the freedom to choose whether or not their child should be wearing a mask for a day or a week or however long they decide to impose it on our students. The science, as you guys were talking about, doctors are coming out saying that a lot of this so-called science isn't necessarily as true as they say it is. And, kids under the age of 18, even unvaccinated children, have a 99% chance of survival. And I went into some of those data points last night when I was doing my public comment in front of the committee. And I felt like now is a really important time for me to be the voice of 50 other students who have reached out to me over the past few days, to be the voice of them in front of this committee and not let them harm our education or our freedom any further than they already have over the past year.
Yeah, one thing that Louie and I talked about earlier today, and I think is really important, is that they act like just put a mask on. There's no consequences. There's nothing, like just put on a mask. What's a big deal? And you might protect somebody.
No,
Like,
Ricky, that's a good point, and I want to expand on that because we have no consideration when we talk. They love to talk about science. Follow the science. Follow the science. Every person's body is different. Every child has a different physiology. Everybody, some are obese, some are fit, some are in all different physiologies. OSHA, if you work at a company where they require you to wear an N95 mask, OSHA guidelines say you are to test every single person with a physical to assess their body's ability to accept a mask. So throwing masks around or just saying, put a mask on, all these kids, you are not even considering the differences in their physiology, their anatomy, their potential illnesses that they have, whether they're physical or mental. Everyone is different. And we talk about diversity. The school loves to throw diversity around. Well, you know what? Let's talk about diversity now. Let's talk about the differences that all of us share that may or may not lead to us being adaptable to wearing a mask all day for 6 or 7 hours a day. And the school committee not yet can prove to me that this wearing a mask all day in a classroom, show me how that does not affect you. Show me there's no effect whatsoever other than a positive effect as far as defending you from COVID. If you can show me that there's no detrimental effect, I don't believe it, because I haven't seen a study that says it's good for them to be in a mask for 6 or 8 hours a day, let alone high school kids who go off to school, to work at Big Y or wherever they're working after work. That's like 10, 12 hours a day wearing a mask. Are you kidding me? So, I mean, there's no consideration when they talk about the science. Let's take each kid aside. Let's see how they do. Do they have other issues that would complicate wearing a mask? And I talked about my daughter last night. And I told you in 2017, she was diagnosed with anorexia. And that diagnosis, I didn't really understand how bad anorexia is. And I know other parents who have it, who are fighting it. It is one of the worst things you can deal with. And I had a doctor tell me, this is almost as bad as cancer. Certain cancers, when you hear that word, oh my God, because there's a very high suicide rate associated with anorexia, very high. And I think 20% of the people who die of anorexia die from committing suicide. And when my daughter had that, she was 85 pounds. Her heart rate was in the 20s. We didn't even know it until we brought her to the doctor. They said, get her to the ER. So she spent a month in the hospital. 14 of those days were in the ICU. And her heart slowed to the point where it almost stopped, and they were calling for defibrillators on 2 occasions. And I was like, oh my God. And I was a runner. I was a big runner, and she kind of got into running. And I felt like it was somewhat my fault that she got into this. So she miraculously beat that episode and put on some weight, and everything went great for a couple of years. And then they shut down the schools. They had everybody mask up. And it was mentioned last night that, oh, it's the isolation that was getting to these kids, not the masks. Well, not in my daughter's case, because even after the masks, she developed what's called exercise-induced bronchial spasms. Didn't happen before the masks, it was after the masks. And it got to the point where they were making these kids run outside, exercising, doing track and field, cross country with masks on. I mean, it is the most ridiculous thing you can possibly do. And to do that to somebody while they're outside exerting themselves, I'm not sure where the science is behind that being a good idea, but it affected her tremendously. So her anorexia started to come back. And here's the other thing is people have no consideration. If you saw someone in Big Y without a mask, the first thing these people do is go, what a narcissist, what a selfish person that person is. They don't know their story. And we always talk about being compassionate and have empathy for other people. Maybe there's a vet over there who lost one of his lungs who can't have a mask on. But the first thought to come to mind is always to degrade or injure that person with a verbal insult. And instead of saying, I wonder what that person's story is. So especially people on the left who have a divine right, they seem to have this divine right to espouse their virtues on everyone else and think that they're above everything without considering, boy, that person might have a struggle that I don't know about. Maybe that's why they're not wearing the mask. So, you know, that really angers me and it agitates me. And firsthand, my daughter struggled with it. And she told me, yeah, Dad, if they go back to these masks, I don't know if I want to go back to school. High honors athlete, a three-sport athlete who gets high honors, doesn't want to do her senior year. I mean, they have no idea how this is impacting these kids. It seriously is. And if it isn't, and you're saying, well, my kid goes to school, she loves wearing the mask. She loves it. She thinks it's great. Well, how do you know that's good for her in the long run? We have no long-term studies of kids wearing masks for 2 or 3 years in a row. None. There's never happened in our history.
And let's be honest about masks.
Yeah.
Even if there was a study where people wear them in a hospital setting, it's one-time use or it's an N95. They're not using the same one over and over again. These masks are in our pocket. They're in our purses. They're in our glove department. They're all over the place. They're picking up germs. Then we put something full of germs. It's a great place for mold and bacteria. We put it on our face and say we're doing this to protect our health. I mean, it makes
common sense.
It's common sense. I mean, you don't need any science studies. You need logic to figure out that makes zero sense. Like I said yesterday at the meeting, the committee meeting, what do we breathe out? Waste gas. It's called carbon dioxide. We breathe it out because it is a waste gas, so we aren't supposed to breathe in. You are now forcing your body, and especially long periods of time. I mean, my wife is a waitress in town at the Villa Rose. Shout out to Villa Rose, and she's a waitress there. When she had to wear them, you know, working doubles, migraines. She would have constant migraines, and then once she didn't have to wear a mask anymore, migraines were gone. Do you think that was coincidental? So, like you said, just because you don't see any. You know, if a child has a little bit of a headache due to a mask wearing, he's not going to know that it's correlated to the mask wearing. He might not even bring it up, and it could have some long-term damage. So when all of the town, okay, masks are optional, and then the one place in town where the most people, the least at risk, are together is the only place masks are mandated. It is the most ridiculous thing ever. It makes no logical sense. And the people who want their kids to wear masks, oh, I mean, do they not leave the house? Do they not go anywhere? I mean, if you had a black light, there's germs everywhere. And guess what? It's actually good. Yesterday, they talked about the Delta variant. It's as contagious as chickenpox or whatever. How did we fight that? We got it. And then we had a immunity forever. We didn't mask people or isolate people. We just let kids get it, and then they had immunity forever, because that's how we fight viruses. We get exposed to them. And like I said, if this is really about health, and no offense towards a lot of these people talking about health, I mean, Alex looks like he's in very good shape. I've been a health nut my whole life. I know Louis is known for doing his town runs from time to time. People who know about health understand that this is not dangerous to young kids or people who are healthy. The truth is the average age is way past the retirement age. It's way, and I know that some people argue if is it 80, is it 70 or whatever. Either way, we can all agree it's way above 70. Okay. So this idea that you're masking little children, and the average age of most teachers are younger too. And if teachers are really that that worried, one, you can get vaccinated, because if you believe it works and you believe it'll protect you from illness, you basically can get vaccinated. The children can't, which in my personal opinion is a good thing, because it's ridiculous to take an experimental vaccine to protect you from something that only kills 0.001, whatever. You're gonna get my point. But or you do another job. Construction is dangerous. If I decide I don't want to do it, or being a cop is dangerous. It's not for everybody. If I truly feel like this is too dangerous for me, then I'm sorry, go get a job somewhere else. There is no logic behind this. It's when we talked about science. I mean, did science tell Charlie Baker to mandate masks in public areas by yourself out in the open? He did that. He also mandated getting the flu vaccine before going back to school. Where's the logic? Where's the science that explains that logic? And then
in an experimental use authorization, it's not even approved by the FDA yet. And everyone is just, there's been not a single long-term study. We're just embracing this.
We are the long-term study.
Yeah, we're just embracing this like this is the solution. This is going to solve everything. Even Biden today was on the TV telling everyone they're a booster in 8 months or whatever it is, when he's not even mandating the staff of the White House to get a vaccine. That is the biggest joke ever.
This is something that Aaron, somebody in the local community, that brought up at the meeting yesterday, which I think is really important, because this has been almost the whole time. This has been one of the bigger issues. She asked the committee, so you're saying maybe we'll start the year with masks, and then and then she, and then maybe we'll remove them. And she's like, well, okay, well, what are you looking for? What are the statistics you need to see to decide that it's okay to remove masks? And it's like, if we just keep waiting and waiting, and that's why I said, like, it's like 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It's like, oh, just give us all your freedoms, all your rights and everything for a little bit, and we'll give them back. Just 2 weeks. Oh, okay, that's not too much to ask. And then next thing you know, it's a month. And next thing you know, it's 6 months. Next thing you know, it's 18 months. And next thing you know, it's never ending. And, so this idea of like, oh, and then we'll see, then we'll have weekly meetings. I mean, we don't have to have weekly meetings. Kids aren't at risk, okay? Getting the vaccine doesn't stop you from getting it or spreading it. So this whole conversation about, oh, once we need more people to get vaccinated. No, it doesn't stop people from getting it or spreading it. So if you're afraid of spreading the virus, that's not going to do its job. And the reason why there's conversations about boosters is because they're not working anyways. So many people are being hospitalized. So that's a whole nother topic. I mean, the main one about masks, I mean, just we have this giant Portuguese festival in Ludlow, which we all enjoy or whatnot. Are all these people in the committee going to protest that? Because if they think a bunch of toddlers are going to cause a pandemic, then they must think the Festa is going to be the next Armageddon. And they should be so scared of that whole event. Are they outside of the church protesting the Portuguese festival? Are they going to be, fighting tooth and nail about this? No, and that's the thing. Like, to me, the fact that so many of them seem to have their mindset, seem to not even be open to a lot of these discussions, makes me think this isn't about science. This isn't about statistics. You're cherry picking the things that help your narrative. Because the truth is, a lot of people like to pretend they're logical and they look at the evidence and come up with a conclusion. But the truth is, these people seem to have come up with a conclusion and then pick the evidence to back it.
And I don't go on the internet and peruse article after article to boost my argument, because you can find it. Any argument will have an article to back it up. So they like to do the debunking and, oh, this is the truth, or or and believe me, they have the advantage because big tech is siding with their arguments all the time. So we're trying to get, when a doctor speaks out and says something's wrong here and they get shut down, do you think they're going to gain anything from that? They're risking their careers. So who's more trustworthy? Someone who's towing the line of big pharma and big government, or you talk to these doctors that are willing to stick their necks out and say there's something wrong here. And again, masking kids, I want them to show me a study that's, some of them wear the same mask all week long. And I read a thing today that if you sneeze into your mask, you should be taking it off and putting on a new one. Now, can you imagine kindergartners, first graders sneezing their mask and then they're just going to leave it on and then they touch it? The minute you touch a mask, you've taken whatever you touched on a surface, you put it right on that mask. Mask getting wet becomes almost like a magnet for germs. So kids are sweating, they're talking. It's absolutely ridiculous to think that you're going to mask children up and even high school kids for 6 to 8 hours a day. It's inhumane, and there's no consideration whatsoever for the long-term effects physically or mentally. It's just mask them up. We're frightened. And some of these people, I don't think they've left their basement in a year and a half. I think they're just so petrified. And there's a thing called living and there's a thing called existing. You can exist and you can have your food Instacarted to your house and you can have your Grubhub and all that stuff. And you can wear your mask and your face shield and everything like that. That's existing. Living is just going out there and accepting risk that's inherent in living. It's driving a car. The kids driving to school or in that bus are far more chance of dying in that car accident on the way to and from school. And you could see some of them driving. There's a real threat right there, is car accidents, the number one killer of people, of teenagers in the country. So risk assessment, really looking at the numbers, nobody's really doing that. We're driven insane by this thing. And some people are just so fixated on it. That's all they think about is COVID, COVID, COVID. In the past year, I've lived my life. My wife and I have gone all over the country. I don't, tell anyone what to do. I do my own thing. But I'm not afraid. And you know what? My dad went to World War II. He got on the ship. He was 17 years old. He faked his age to get into the Navy to go into World War II. And he got on his ship and the commander of the ship said, "Hey kid, what are you crying about?" Because my father was in tears. He was homesick. And the commander of the ship said to him, "Why the tears? What's the matter?" And my father said, "I'm homesick." And you know what the commander said to him? He said, "Don't worry about it, kid. You'll be dead in 2 weeks anyway." So my father said to me, "How do you think that made me feel?" There was no safe space there. There was no patting you on the back and, helping me, making me feel better. My father said I was better for that. So, some of these people, you might as well put these kids in mothballs and bubble wrap them and, keep Johnny away from, everything, little Johnny or whatever. But it's time, we start living, and putting masks on kids is to me, it's cruel.
Alex, you want to add to that? Also, I'd be curious to know, did you go back to school with masks? I mean, what did other people think? Do you think the most of the kids in the high school felt the way you felt and felt like it was doing more harm than good wearing masks?
Well, just to get to a question real quick, and I'll answer that a little bit in a minute. These people, especially like in Ludlow on the forum, they keep saying, and even at the committee last night, they're like, well, wear masks, continue to wear masks, keep everyone safe. But they have no answer for when that will end. And Dr. Kelly, or the chair of the committee, he had no answer for a percentage. These people are just going to drag it on forever and ever and ever. And that's why, as he just said, we got to live our life. We can't just keep living in fear for years and years until essentially one of us dies. I mean, obviously I have a while to that, but people, old people, middle-aged people that are living their lives in fear in their homes or masked, they're not going to be able to live their life, and they're going to die at some point, soon, not being able to live their life for who knows how long, because these liberals are pushing them with fear mongering and saying, hey, you need a mask, but they have no answer for when that will end. At first it was when you get the vaccine, and 2 weeks ago they reversed that guidance and said you still need to wear a mask while you're vaccinated. So, to answer your question, well, when we went back in the spring or late winter, we had to wear masks. And at that point, I wasn't going to fight the masks. Obviously, I wasn't happy about it, but it's certainly better than, being online, I guess. But at this point, especially with all the data that's came out since then, over the past 6 months about children and how safe we are, 99% survival rates, etc., how safe we are from the virus, or dying from the virus at least, I feel that we need to be back in school for our education, and we don't need the masks because of, we're not that susceptible to dying from the COVID-19 virus. It's not needed in school. I've had 50 plus people reach out to me over the past 2 days saying, hey, I don't want to wear a mask, but many of my fellow classmates are too scared to go in front of that committee, and they know I'm not. So they'll tell me how they feel, and then I went on last night and I spoke for all of them as well as myself, saying, hey, we don't need masks. Yet the school committee, they sat there with their blank faces, not really listening to what I actually said. And I'm sure they barely listened to what everyone else said, and I wish they had. But this committee has continuously, meeting after meeting, heard these public comments and just not gave a crap. They've sat there, while we gave the comments, they haven't responded really to a single one until Sarah last night said, is the survey possible? We haven't really got a response from this committee on our questions or our comments. They don't care.
And what a pathetic survey. It was just one sentence. Should we be wearing masks? Should masks be mandated? I don't even know
let me comment on the survey, because one thing I know quite a bit about dissecting the media and reading the work of Edward Bernays, the godfather of propaganda, and understanding how they can subconsciously sway you in one direction or another. I don't know if it was on purpose. Obviously, I can't get in their heads, but it seemed really coincidental the way that they worded the survey. So for what Alex was mentioning was yesterday they were supposed to vote if they were going to make masks optional, which I think is fair, because that means what I believe isn't being forced onto what, to you. You can do what you want. I can do what I want. Everybody's happy. Everybody, you live and let live. Or they were going to start the year with masks, but that is kind of deceiving, because like I said, when a parent asked, well, if we start the year with masks, you're kind of painting the picture that eventually we'll remove them. But what are you looking for? What are the numbers? What are I discussed this. So they didn't have an answer, which means that they can just, basically decide when they want to remove them or if they want to keep them all year. And or they'll say, oh, cases, or we've had a few cases. We had there is people. I mean, there's one. I saw a study recently that they believe one child in all of the U.S. under the age of, I don't know, like 25, died of COVID and had no other health issues. It's the only death that they could, without a doubt, it's undebatable, COVID was the cause of death. That's it. One. Okay. Many kids die of cancer, of all these suicides, of overdoses. We had a real epidemic of overdoses and killing young people. I mean, even the the seasonal flu kills young people. Not once did I hear a teacher say, you know what, we should mask to protect the kids. And so it's like it's never ending. And I would even understand their logic if other places were also requiring it. But the fact that you live in a town, and surrounding towns, you live in a state that basically it's optional everywhere, and you're going to make kids wear them. I mean, in my personal opinion, it's borderline child abuse. And the head of the CDC, well, he was the head of that CDC, and I know you quoted him yesterday, Louis. He recently was being interviewed, and he was talking about the mask mandates. I think I can screen share and share this little video with you guys about what he said. Give me a second. We'll play this real quick.
After a year of this, how do we know that masks work? Should we be listening to the CDC? This is what the former head of the CDC had to say.
when you look at what the CDC has recommended now, they're basically saying everybody should be masked, right? And we talked about the fact that there has been no study that would back that up. So the question is, and you say you did some studies then, but you did them with dummies. Where have they been for the past, ever since then? What's been going on for the past 9-10 months? Why don't we have data rather than, as you say, just opinion that's leading this push with our schools?
I think it's a fair criticism. You heard I think in the Wall Street.
I'd say that's that's something that has to be considered, right? I mean, this is the head of the CDC. He has access to, or he was the head of the CDC, has access to all the data, and he hasn't seen any data to support that. So what information are people looking at? And I mean, on the N95 masks, which we know that's not what everybody's going to be wearing anyways, on the N95 masks, it says on the box, does not stop the spread of coronaviruses. Like it says it on the mask. I actually shared a photo of it and got fact checked. And actually, Louis, your wife's commented quickly. She's like, oh, that that got fact checked quickly. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know who they're fact checking. I'm like, the manufacturer, because these are my statements. I'm like, who are they? Like they're telling you that their product is not. So it's so absurd. It's so absurd. And let me make this public. I emailed everybody in that committee. I told them that I was going to do this show. I told them that they were more than welcome to come on. These topics are complex. There's layers to them. You don't discuss these at a quick committee meeting where you have a couple minutes to talk. You don't discuss them on Facebook where you're like, oh, here's this article, here's that article. Look, this article says you've been debunked. It's like, no, you take your time to discuss them in long form conversation. And I've given them the opportunity to do that. I didn't hear back from any of them except Chip, who just said, thank you for reaching out. But that was it. And I promise you that none of them would be willing to come on with any of us and have a actual long form discussion about this. These are complex topics. Obviously, there's a lot of information, misinformation, there's all this stuff, but we can talk about it. We can figure it out. And we also have brains. And if you're honest about, hey, I don't have an agenda, I don't have some type of dogma that's influencing my decision making, and let me just go on here and share ideas, challenge ideas, and for the purpose. And if your true purpose is just to filter out the bad ideas and get to the good ideas, then I'm certain that we'll all reach to some type of middle ground, but like I'm sure many of your guys' experiences has been with people who disagree with you, is that in many cases they're emotional discussions. They're you make a point and they try to debunk you instead of actually focusing on your point. So it's not about getting to some truth, to some sense of truth. It's about ego. It's about trying to prove you right. It's trying to defend my perspective. You plant this flag. This is my team. My team is the pro-mask team. I'm going to defend it till the end of time, regardless if any new information comes in or anybody makes a logical argument. Well, that's also the definition of ignorance. That's the definition of ignorance. If you ignore all new information and you're just sticking to your guns, then that's ignorant. So people have to stop being ignorant and understand that we're all on the same team. I'm on team human. I'm on team. I want every color kid, every, whatever political party their parents are from, whatever ideology their parents might have, whatever income they have. I want every kid to breathe in oxygen, because there's videos all over the internet. A lot of them suppressed now. It's hard to find. But if you go on some of the alternative video platforms of kids passing out while doing track and field, kids hospitalized because they're wearing masks and doing athletic things. So it's like this stuff. How do you just ignore that? That's not a concern. That's not any evidence at all. That doesn't prove anything. And yet you're and just like a parent said yesterday, and it's so true, it is impossible to keep little kids, 6, 7, 8-year-old, from not touching each other and not, so it's like all you're doing is you're creating the illusion of safety. So what we're doing is, you talk about psychological trauma, Louis. I think a lot of these people are psychologically traumatized, which I don't blame them, because the media scared the crap out of them for a year and a half. Every single day said, you're going to die. They showed videos of dead bodies in the streets in China. They built hospitals, which were never used, outside of hospitals, and they scared you and showed you every single case number. Even though I know plenty of people who got it, and they're fine. I mean, and of course there's going to be exceptions to every rule. People die of things. That's just a part of living. That's a part of when there is a risk to being free. When you go skydiving, when I decide to have a drink, there's risks to that. When I hop in my car and I drive, there's a risk to that. Okay. This idea that you're going to remove all risks all the time, everywhere, means we don't live in a free country. It means we don't, you're removing our freedom. And the problem is, I had a guest on my show, and then I'll let you guys chime in, because people are sick of me ranting on the show. They want to hear other voices. But I had this guest on the show who talked about, like, how they put you on a chain, and then they give you a little bit of chain, and it's like you're free, and it's like, no, I'm not free. You just gave me a little bit of chain. They're like, okay, we'll give you a little bit more chain. You're free now, and it's like, no. As long as you're on that chain, you're not free. And that's kind of what they're doing. They're saying, we'll do masks just in the beginning of the year. That's how they questioned the survey. They sent out the survey, and I got way off track because I'm pretty sure I wanted to comment on this like 20 minutes into this rant. But the way they questioned it was, are parents for, or parent, I'm going to mess up the language, but it's something similar. Maybe Alex knows the exact language, but it's like, are parents for mandating masks in the beginning of or starting the year off with masks, something along those lines, basically creating the illusion that it's only temporary for the beginning. Instead of being honest and saying, we have no guidelines to when we'll accept not having masks. So the question should be, should parents have the right to make the decision if their kids should or shouldn't wear a mask? Are you for the parents deciding that? That's how it should be questioned. It shouldn't be like, hey, do you mind temporarily putting a mask on your kid just in the beginning of the season? Oh, by the way, I know in yesterday's meeting, we were asked when we could remove masks, and they didn't give us, we couldn't give a definite answer, but it's just temporary. Trust us. Just like stay at home, lock your doors. Don't worry about the small businesses. We just need 2 weeks. Trust us. Like, it's just the same script, different year.
And if I'm not mistaken, we had 2 options last night. One was the mandatory masking. The other was the DESE recommendation that strongly recommending masks. Those were the 2 options. That's the way the question should have been worded, the way it was presented to the people last night at that meeting. That's how that should have been worded, not some random question the way it was worded. It should have been factually accurate, exactly the way they presented it last night, and it wasn't. So in my mind, it's not the poll is not accurate. It doesn't give the reader the correct information, the way it was presented. And secondly, I'm sick and tired of these forums, and I'm not on Facebook. I don't want any part of that garbage, but these people exist on Facebook. They almost live for this forum. And I don't know what happened to dialogue, but I know the school committee shut out everyone for the last year and a half because the open meeting laws were suspended. Wasn't that convenient? So no one could confront them, except if you sent an email. That is absolutely ridiculous. And to me, it was like, let's just hide behind the open meeting law that's been curtailed, and it allows us to do our business without feeling any fear of confrontation. God forbid somebody should question us. And they have become the ministry of truth. And I'll speak directly about the chairman, who has become the minister of truth when it comes to knowing the facts about COVID. And it's almost an arrogance that he espouses to the people as though we are just ignorant. And I've heard that term being described to describe some people. I've heard crazy. People who don't want masks are crazy. Well, let me tell you something. When you wake up in the morning and you look in the bed to make sure your daughter's breathing because she has a major mental health issue or a disorder, like a lot of people have, we're not crazy. And that's extremely insulting. And people who, again, the left espouses empathy and compassion. And I don't see that. And I would never wish anyone dead. But I'm hearing a lot of people on the left say, well, if you don't get the vaccination, you deserve to die, or you don't wear the masks and you want to kill people. The vitriol that comes out of their mouths is disgusting. And maybe they should look in the mirror instead of always saying, oh, look at those right-wing idiots. They're uneducated. I'm sick of hearing that, because I'll match wits with any one of them if they want. And I'll compare facts. And I'm not saying I'm better than them. And I'm not saying my facts are better. But don't talk down to me. And that's how I felt last night, that they were talking down to me. And I poured my heart out last night, and I said some things that were really emotional and felt a lot. And I wanted to be the voice for the people out there who are hurting, that may not have the guts to go to a meeting and speak out. But I know there are families with people who are suffering from depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, and the struggle is 24/7. And you're going to tell me that, oh, I'm afraid of COVID. Well, until you really have a struggle that's life-threatening in your family and someone is on the edge, you have no idea what a struggle is. And I don't want to even hear about, this masking thing makes me sick to my stomach, because after I poured my heart out last night, you'd think one of them would have walked down and said, hey, your kid needs help. Let me refer you to a counselor. Let's talk about this. They just sat there with stone faces, and it didn't even look like it fazed them, which bothers me, because I would have liked to have heard a comment. We can understand the struggle. Maybe we should focus on that a little. Let's talk about helping these kids out. Nothing. It's COVID, COVID, COVID. And they're talking about Alice drills and all this other stuff they do in the school for, put your money where your mouth is, because it was there before. Ludlow Cares Coalition, Michael Dias Foundation, incredibly help people. They do amazing things. We forgot, no one even mentions those organizations anymore, as though people aren't struggling anymore. And that's a sad thing. And I wanted to open that dialogue, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be opened. It's almost like they're infatuated with this COVID thing. And it's mind boggling to me. And it's a sad state of where we're at right now.
Alex, you want to add to that? I did bring my kids for the purpose of them putting faces, because we talk about children. I'm like, these are the kids that you're affecting. These are the smiles you're trying to cover up. My son had nightmares because he was having nightmares because the mask thing became such an issue that he was having nightmares of being chased by the police for not wearing a mask. I mean, it's just, this is this type of psych. And I mean, if anybody knows me, I let my kids live as free as we could in 2020 and live as normal, try to create as normal as an environment as I could. And they're dealing with some trauma. So never mind the kids that are being scared, that are being, that are soaking in all this fear mongering and really feel like their lives are at risk. I mean, it really, bothers me, obviously.
Yeah. To a few things that both of you said, right now, he just touched on the Alice drill. Miss Nemeth, who's our former high school principal and now interim superintendent, she went on about how we have Alice drills, fire drills. We had a fire drill, I think, one last year. Honestly, I'm not even sure that we had that, but we haven't had an Alice drill in my memory in 2 to 3 years. And I don't even understand the comparison that she was trying to make between that and masks, because that's three totally different things. One's a fire, one's somebody coming into the school to shoot students and staff, and another's a mask among a population that has a 99% chance of survival from what it's supposed to protect you from. And, about the private comment thing, nobody was allowed to have a public comment in front of that committee for a year and a half because it was digital. I mean, I had one public comment, and it was because of how much pressure that I was able to get onto the school committee from other people in town. And that was back when I was trying to reopen the schools. I had one, and the rest of them, you had to email the school committee your public comment so that they could read it at the end, which has little to no effect on them reading it. If it has little to no effect, us being up there yesterday, it certainly had no effect them reading an email throughout the past year and a half. And as somebody I have the YouTube comment chat on the other screen, somebody had mentioned that parents can look at everything, and they can. I said that in a Facebook comment earlier today too, to somebody who said that we needed masks. Parents here, my parents, you guys as parents, every parent in the country, they watch the news, they have social media, they have some form of being informed on this issue where they can look at CDC guidance, they can look at DESE guidance, they can look at state guidance or, independent research. They can look at all of this and then evaluate on their own based on their child and their family situation, what is best for their child or their family. It's not like the parents are incapable of doing so. So I don't understand why the school committee is making it seem like that. And, back to we don't know when this will end, the question, hold on, I can actually read the question from the survey. It was the school district should start the school year requiring masks for all students or staff in school buildings. So yeah, that means start the school year. And he had no answer for when that may end, at what percentage. And honestly, I think he means at a 0%, like 0%. But in reality, the infection rate will never be at 0%. This isn't like other viruses it's been compared to. It's like the flu or the common cold. It's an airborne virus. This isn't going to go away. Sure, the flu slowed down with the vaccine, and I'm sure this will too, but it will never be at 0. It will never go away like Kelly or all these other school committee members across the country seem to think it will.
Exactly.
That's so true. I mean, you see a new variant. A lot of people have been talking about how the original virus is basically already dead and gone. Now you're starting to see different variants. So, I mean, this is just like the flu. You're going to see it from time to time. It's probably going to harm some people. Like we discussed before, that's just a part of being alive. I mean, when I've said this before on the podcast and the friends of mine about how before 2020, I mean, and this is how upside down the world has become. If you went to work, if you didn't go to work because you had a runny nose or a cough or some mild cold, you'd get yelled at. I mean, your employer would actually get mad at you if you called out for such a small thing, a small cold, a small sickness or whatever. If you weren't bedridden, I remember I have friends of mine, and I'm sure you guys all know family and friends who would call out and say, I can't be seen in person. I can't go in public because I called out of work. What are we saying? We're saying like, I have to be bedridden to before I can, it's okay for me not to go to work. So what does that mean? Everybody was okay with people with the sniffles to go to work and spread the germs, and everybody got sick. And now all of a sudden, if you spread germs and they trace it back to you, you're a murderer because grandmother died because, it's like, what happened? This was just a way of life. And again, I don't blame everybody because many people aren't like us who will look under different places and go to different places to find alternative perspectives and opinions. Most people just turn on the TV. They don't know what BitChute is. They don't know what Odyssey is. They don't know what alternative media is. They don't know where the first place to start. They're not getting both sides of the argument. They're force-fed one side of the argument, and that's why they look at us like we're crazy. Because if I was seeing everybody telling me the sky is purple, the sky is purple, the sky is purple, and then somebody comes around and says, actually, it's blue, they're like, this person's nuts. Everybody on TV, everybody that's around me, everybody's saying it's purple. This is the one guy who's saying it's blue. And now I go on Google, the biggest search engine in the world, and then YouTube, the second biggest search engine in the world, and try to find out if the sky's actually blue or purple, and they're suppressing the information. So I'm just being force-fed the narrative I've already agreed on is reality. So you can paint any illusion you want. So a lot of times when people look at us like we are crazy, it's almost like, oh, okay, I understand. Like you're only around people who agree with you. You're in an echo chamber of people who agree with you. You're only listening to people who agree with you. That's why on this podcast, I've had people from the left, from the right, I've had people from the middle, I've had socialist scholars, I've had libertarian scholars, I've had everything and anything, because my only goal is to explore ideas and go on this journey of trying to figure out what makes the most sense. I have no agenda. Like I said yesterday at the meeting, I'm a political atheist. I've had people like Jack Abramoff and Roger Stone on. I've had people like Professor Richard Wolff, who's one of the leading scholars in Marxism. I mean, I just like talking to people and extracting some wisdom, some ideas, and having thought-provoking conversations. So, it is unfortunate that this topic and all these topics that revolve around the lockdown and the COVID scenario have been political, where like my team says this, so I defend it. And that's it. It's not about and then yet they will still keep spouting it's about science, it's about science, it's about statistics. It's like, well, everybody, I was being banned off, or being fact checked all over the social media for things that now have become acceptable to talk about, like the fact that it possibly came from a lab, all these things that it basically was a bad flu. I mean, I remember early 2020 or even mid 2020, if you ever compared it to the flu, I mean, the uproar of people on social media, they would just go crazy. It's not a flu. People are dying everywhere. Now everybody knows somebody who's had it. Everybody knows somebody who's recovered from it. Everybody knows somebody who slept in the same bed with somebody who got it, and yet they didn't get it, which is another, so there's all these question marks. It's like, okay, well, how dangerous is this? And now that people have become a little more skeptical, now they've changed basically the way we view this. Initially, it was like, if you get it, you're going to die. We need to lock down the world. Now it's like, yeah, it's a bad flu, but we want to prevent people from dying from the bad flu, so we're going to lock down.
Ricky, there's a disconnect too. These people love to extract articles from the internet, and there's almost these weird battles on there's a rabbit hole of, oh, look at what I posted that debunks your article. Oh, look what I posted debunks your article. I'm speaking like from personal experience. I don't need to go on the internet to find out what these things do. I've seen what it's done to my daughter. Okay. Now, I left the job. I did 30 years in law enforcement. I saw some horrible things. I retired with, PTSD. And I don't like wearing an N95 mask because that brings me back to all the dead body calls. You have to wear an N95 mask. And the strangest thing, you can smell the dead body right through an N95 mask. So I'm not sure how big these particles are, but I'll tell you what, dead bodies, they smell, especially when they've been around a while. And unfortunately, I got exposed to a lot of that. I don't like wearing an N95 mask. I know what it does to me mentally. It brings me back to horrible things. I don't need to go on the internet to say, oh, do masks cause mental illness or do they cause PTSD to come back? Well, I can tell you, they sure as hell do. So I don't need to find out from some doctor. I don't need the chairman of the school committee to tell me that, oh, that's a bunch of, that's been debunked. Well, it hasn't been debunked because I can tell you I've lived it. So I don't need to hear that. And I don't know if he's ever lived it. I don't know if he's been in a situation that I've ever been in. I don't know if he's into taking risks. I don't think he is. But I don't need to be told that I'm wrong when I lived it. And getting back to that whole left or right thing, people don't realize that I'm not just this guy who's against masks because I just want to be against masks and it's a freedom thing. It has nothing to do with that. In fact, in January of 2020, before anyone had a clue what the hell was going on, I was listening to this guy on a podcast, Chris Mortensen. He's, I hope I got the name right, but he's got a great podcast. And he was way ahead of the curve. And he was saying, something going on in Wuhan, China, we got to keep an eye on it. And I listened to him every day. And I was working at a warehouse in Charlton, and I would go down there and I'd say, hey, something weird in China. I think it's going to, it could come this way. And I have a good friend who's a infectious disease doctor in San Diego. And I called him up and I go, hey, I'm kind of worried about this thing. Could that come here? And his answer was, no, it's no chance. If it comes here, it's only going to end up in the big cities and they'll squash it. And I said, well, my daughter goes to a local college, and there's a lot of kids from China there. Is there a possibility that when they come to school, they could bring it after break? I don't know. Sure as hell, look what happened. And I told him, I said, I'm really worried about it. And when it started to pop up cases here and there, guess who was the first one in town that I know of to put a mask on and pull their kids out of school? It was me. I was wearing a mask in Randall's Farm, and people were looking at me like, what are you doing? Are you going to do surgery? And I'd be like, no, I'm worried about this COVID thing I think it was called coronavirus at the time. And then I'm like really freaking out. And I had my kids, I quit work going out of the gym. I pulled my kid out of the gym. I was like, I took it seriously. But then over time, you start to look at things. And I wasn't looking at mainstream media. I was looking for people who were out there with courage to tell me what was really going on. And I started to say, wait a minute, this is starting to get fishy. And of course, it snowballed into where I am now, where I'm completely skeptical of the whole thing. And I'm sad to see the state of humanity right now and living in the fear. And it's just a sad state we're in. But believe me, I took it very seriously early on. And I wasn't one of these people that was just like, oh no, this is a bunch of crap. I came to that supposition after a lot of research, just like you guys. But I did want to ask Alex a question. Do they reach out to you and say, if anybody needs any mental health help or needs to talk to somebody, we'll have counselors available? Has that ever happened, or is it just not even recognized?
In my opinion, they haven't, without a death of a student or something traumatic happening in town or in the nation, really. They haven't really said, hey, we have counselors needed. I mean, I guess they're there for you to reach out to them, but they haven't openly announced or advertised, continually or regularly that they have counselors there, except for when former students or current students have passed away.
When it's too late.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no proactive mental health approach here. If anybody needs to talk to somebody, if you're struggling with this situation, come on in, we'll talk to you. I'm sure there's some support people there. I understand there are, but I think there should be more of a proactive effort to get through to these kids, because I'm telling you right now, I know families out there who are struggling with depression and suicidal tendencies and drug abuse. And I also know that there's no resources right now, very, very little, because these poor practitioners, they're booked solid all day long. And I know that from experience, because I'm trying to find a family member some support, and we can't find anybody. And I'm being told left and right, no room, no room, no room. That's a dangerous situation here. And I wish we could come together. And I believe the school committee has the best intentions. I think, they want to do what's best for our kids. I understand the human compassion factor on both sides, but we need to focus a little bit more on what we're doing and pay more attention to mental health, and we're not doing that.
Well, go ahead, Alex.
No, I just wanted to add real quick to what I said earlier. To answer his question, there have been some teachers that I know personally and that I've had that, I know some students with, depression or issues, and some of those teachers have been more supportive. And these teachers have no psychological or training or anything like that have been more supportive and understanding towards these students than a counselor reaching out and being proactive about it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, because when I was on the job before COVID, depression and mental health issues were everywhere. And it was just getting worse and worse as the years progressed until I retired. And now with COVID, I know it's just, it should not be ignored. It should be explored. And I also feel for teachers, because I'm sure there are teachers, like Alex said, that are afraid to speak out because of they're going to lose their jobs. They have to act a certain way. And I know for a fact that's going on, that teachers, they'll speak behind the sidelines and they'll speak anonymously, but there's no truth to what is really going on when you can't speak the truth. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, and the benefit of this show is I get people reaching out to me all over the world and all over the US. And there's so many people who work at hospitals, so many people who are teachers, so many people who are doctors, who will share like a little piece of information, but they're like, hey, I can't publicly talk about this, right? Just the backlash is too much. I'm afraid of being pigeonholed at my job. So this stuff does happen. I know people are talking about, oh, just go to Bay State, Bay State in a lot of the hospitals all over the U.S., similar to most places of employment. They're struggling to find employees. I mean, that's a big thing. And the other thing that people don't understand about hospitals, and I have a lot of friends who work at hospitals. I know doctors, I know nurses, I know people who work at the ICU. Hospitals are like hotels. The beds need to be filled to make money. So this idea that, oh, we're at this percent capacity, that's actually good for business. They always want to be at some high percentage of capacity, because if they're not, they're not making money. They can't. I mean, the equipment's expensive. The salaries are expensive. They need to keep those beds filled. So this idea that, the hospitals are getting filled again. It's like, have I don't know anybody who has never been to a hospital and had to wait. Like that's just normal. I mean, you go to an emergency room, you always have to wait. I mean, that's just what happens. It's not, a bed's not always available. So, but I think this has become a obsession with COVID. I mean, it's this, we can talk about suicide rates. We can talk about I said it kind of jokingly, but it's statistically true that they have a better chance of dying in a car or on the way to school, or getting struck by lightning on the way to school, than actually dying of COVID in school. All these things don't matter. Domestics are going up. Child abuse is going up. Suicide rates for a long time now has surpassed COVID deaths in China-fornia, and yet nobody. I guess I did call it China-fornia, and it's and nobody cares. They're like, yeah, but what about COVID? What about? It's almost to the point where all these other issues in the world have taken the back seat. Like, all these other deaths don't matter. If you don't die of this, then you're not the focus. You don't matter. And it's inconsiderate. It's not sensitive to all the other issues. I mean, people who've lost loved ones to cancer or whatever, all these other issues. And yet it's like, well, what about COVID? What about COVID? It's the media and this whole world has created this just obsession with just fighting this one thing. Well, what have we learned, right? We learned that give the experts all our money and authority, and then we get mistakes like Afghanistan, right? Because it's a current event, we can talk about it. The experts said we can fix this, and now the longest running war in American history, trillions of taxpayers' money went into this.
I've
Lost innocent people who have been who've died because of casual, just being at the wrong place, wrong time. People in the military with PTSD. All these lives changed forever, and all we do is, oops, yeah, I think we messed up. Like, that's it. I mean, it is our generation's Vietnam. When did government, and when did the media, and when did big pharma and big corporations all become the good guys? Pfizer, who has the worst track record ever, there's drugs that get FDA approved to be safe and soon after get taken off the market. Okay, so the whole FDA approval process is already ridiculous. Now you add the emergency authorization where they get to skip some steps and use some experimental new technology. Then it's like, are you really trust this thing? Are you sure? And do you really trust these people to get us healthy when their business is capitalizing on us being sick? It doesn't make any sense.
And that's the other thing. Where's the focus on nutrition, exercise? Why don't we expand gym class? Why don't we make, get rid of McDonald's in town? Why don't we get rid of Burger King? If obesity is one of the huge comorbidities to what kills people with COVID, why don't we start talking about eating healthy and taking care of our immune system? There's nothing about that. It's all about vaccines, vaccines and masking. Where's the nutrition part of this? And that's a huge part of it, because you know what? I eat healthy, I exercise, I take care of my immune system. And there's some people that they don't care at all. And they're not in great shape, and they're not making any effort to get better. I'll just rely on the vaccine and I'll be fine. It doesn't work that way. And a strong immune system, there's nothing more potent than a strong immune system. And if you had COVID, not a single conversation has been had by anyone, especially on the school committee, about the possibility of having, any antivirus or any previous, if you were previously infected, if you have the antibodies.
Yeah.
Do you have the antibodies? You might, but I don't expect the school committee to do that. And I also don't expect them to be medical, they shouldn't be in charge of the medical part of my kid's life. Like we didn't elect them to do what they're doing. We elected them to like hire a superintendent, take care of policy or whatever they got to do. But to now like dictate medically what my child has to adhere to, and it's not just them, it's colleges, mandating vaccines, colleges mandating masks. It boggles my mind that these institutions of higher learning, which are supposed to be the place where, everything, all the intelligence lies, seem to be lacking in that area. And that's unfortunate. I'm shocked by where we've come to. And I'm hoping things change, but every time I say that, it just progressively gets worse.
Yeah, I mean, universities are supposed to be a place to explore ideas, and now it's a place where they teach you what to think, not how to think, and it's it's a huge issue. I mean, people that a year ago or more than that, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was coming to me with nutritional just they wanted suggestions and advice. Now all of a sudden everybody's become a health expert. I'm like, I've been deep into health and nutrition my whole life. I've spent many of hours talking to nutritionists, health experts, taking care of myself. I mean, I always say, like, yourself is the perfect business card. If you want to prove to somebody that you know anything about health, then let's look at you. Ask my pediatricians or my kids' pediatricians how healthy my kids are. They probably don't even remember my kids because they never go in because they never have to. So
Right.
They go in every 6 months to check their height and weight. I mean, it's health is so important. If they care about children's health, why were they okay with building a Wendy's and a KFC in town?
Right.
Why, I mean, that's just common sense. I mean, it's full of preservatives, it's full of sucralose and everything, these artificial sweeteners, and it's like, it's not about health, because there's example after example after example. If you really cared about children's health or just health in general, why weren't you outspoken about this or that or that or that? It's like all of a sudden you care about health. All of a sudden you've become a health expert. It's like, how many, first of all, there's a lot of doctors that aren't even that healthy. It's like many of them don't even practice what they preach. It's like they tell you something because that's what the research said. Well, your body should be the experiment. I mean, you try things, you eat things, you and then you figure out what works best, and that's the best way of going about it. I mean, it's really easy to just say, oh, this is what you should do, or that's what you should do. But the people who are actually doing it, who are putting in the practice, those are the ones who actually understand how the body works and how to improve and optimize the body. So that's not even a discussion. We have obesity all over the place. We have kids younger and younger being diabetic. I mean, those are, and again, and you can go back to the overdose thing. When flu and pills were killing young people, I mean, that's undebatable. Were they this passionate? Were they outspoken? Were they trying to create some new policy or mandating? Were they protesting anywhere? Were they upset? No. And this is why I tend to believe it's one of two things. Either one, it's political. You're just defending your team till the end of the time. Or two, the trauma of a year and a half of fear mongering has seeped so deep into you that you are just as convinced it's dangerous as I am convinced it's not.
Right. When I was, here's an example. When I was 35 years old, I was putting on a little bit of weight, and I was shoveling one day, and I'm like, whoa, I don't feel right. I'm way out of shape. So I ended up going to my doctor. My doctor said, you know what, you're pre-hypertensive, and I can guarantee you by the time you're 50, you're going to be on blood pressure medicine. And my blood pressure was a little bit high at the time. So I made the decision to start exercising and running and doing triathlons. And then I ended up at 53 now, I'm not on a single pill. And I've had doctors tell me there's no way you're not going to be on blood pressure medicine. And I ended up eating right. I'm a vegetarian. I'm not telling anybody else they need to do that, but that was my personal choice, and it benefited me tremendously. And it takes a little degree of motivation. Get off the couch, get away from the computer, get away from the video games, get out there and live. And it benefits you in multiple ways, mentally, physically. And again, look, I was in great shape and I still fell victim to PTSD. I mean, but I don't know what would have happened had I not been in good physical shape and had to endure PTSD. It could have been a whole different story. So being healthy inside and outside and exercising benefits you tremendously. But that conversation is not being had by big pharma. Wouldn't touch that because there's no profit to be made. The hospitals don't want you eating healthy. Most doctors are not educated in nutrition. Very few. And I've had conversations with some of them and just like, oh, you're a vegetarian, how do you get your protein? Well, there's multiple ways you get protein as being a vegetarian. And they're like, how? I don't understand. That's not healthy. There's a lot to be said about learning about nutrition. And I think it would be great if you've got kids. I think the cafeteria could be a place of learning about foods and things like that. But no, they just go in there. It's just like Pink Floyd, The Wall, where the kids are walking through, dumping food on the plate and they sit down. And then of course I think they have to pull their mask down to eat. And they have to put it back up. Is that true, Alex? Or are you allowed to just remove it?
So it's going to be different this year than it was last year. We had our assigned lunchroom, and we were there for maybe an hour and a half, and we would eat in there. While we were eating, even if we weren't at the time, we could have our mask off while we were eating and drinking. But you weren't allowed to take 30 minutes or 45 minutes to eat and drink. You ate your food within a timely manner with your mask off, and as soon as you were done, you put it on. Whenever you tried to talk, you put it on. And this year, we're in the cafeteria, which is like not that. They're talking about distancing and masks and all this. Cafeteria, we're inches apart, not even feet. We're inches apart, and we're gonna be without masks. It really doesn't make sense, and it's not right what they're doing. And last year we didn't even get to choose those rooms either, so that takes into the social aspect of this whole thing and what they're doing. It's affecting students my age socially because we're not having the same high school experiences as many other people do. We're not able to talk to our friends because we weren't able to go to different lunchrooms really. So we were in these assigned lunchrooms. Luckily I had, the teacher was nice. I had a few friends in there, but a lot of other people I know, weren't able to talk to anyone for the entire period, an hour and a half, not talking to anyone, eating your food, doing your work for the rest of the time. It's not only the health aspect of it, but it's the social aspect. It has detrimental effects socially and mentally on students from, all ages.
I think back to like my high school days where we had dances, we had concerts, we had proms, we had all kinds of things where we could all get together and have a good time. And I can't even imagine kids now. Can you imagine your senior year last year? You're going to open that yearbook up. What are you going to see? You can see masks all over your yearbook. I mean, they have no consequence. Please think about the future, what these kids are going to look back on. And then I think about the first, second, and third graders, like after 1 or 2 years, like they're going to be conditioned. And next, 5 years from now, if there's a bad flu going around, all the masks are going to come back on. I don't know what's changed. I don't know why, they're fear mongering, but the balance between, again, living and existing. We need to like face up to reality here and give these kids a chance to live.
Yeah, we really do. And, that's kind of what I said at the end of my speech yesterday to the school committee was, you've done enough damage to us. That's what I meant when I said that. You've done enough damage to us over the past year, don't do more or get out of office, because really, and I have to go in a few minutes, so I'm just gonna make my final statement now. really what, for any viewers watching, you have to go to these school committee meetings. You have to fight back against these people trying to mandate this on kids. And if they do eventually mandate it, try to fight it every school committee meeting, try and get it reversed. And if they don't do that, then during your next election, do everything you possibly can to get them out of office. And I know that's certainly what I'm going to do for any of those members other than Chip who do decide to run for re-election.
Yeah, without a doubt, start locally, make some noise, let people know. I think too often people were just at home upset. They have issues with what's going on in their local government or town, and they just kind of complain about it among themselves, and they're not out there and being heard. So I just shared the Zoom link in the Facebook Ludlow forum and on my Facebook page, where a lot of people have been debating all day. So if anybody wants to jump in, we'll talk for a little bit longer. I'll give you some time to jump in. If anybody, keyboard warriors, if you agree or disagree with us, I'm open to discussing it. So feel free to join in. Nobody's going to attack you. Nobody's going to, try to make you look bad. It's just open discussion. So I just wanted to throw that out there for people who didn't seem that I shared the Zoom link. But yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I mean, this is so your show. Let's keep plugging. Actually, let's because so your show's on every night or every Wednesday night at 9.
So it is usually every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on jcdnetwork.com. Today we had a technical issue with the servers for that, so I'm using my YouTube channel to stream tonight's episode. That's linked on my Facebook, Twitter, whatever. And I've commented in this chat a few times too. So that's where it'll be tonight, but usually it's on jcdnetwork.com at 9 on Wednesdays.
Yeah, and I also believe that you can get it on any podcast app, because I found it on Podcast Addict. So you can,
yes,
after it's recorded and released. Awesome. So yeah, great. So the saga continues. I know both you guys are running out of a little bit of time. So if anybody shows up, I'll debate them on my own, which I don't mind. But thank you so much. I really want to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat about this today. Thank you for standing up yesterday and just speaking your truth and sharing your thoughts. I shared my thoughts last night on the Ludlow forum, and it got taken down twice. I shared my thoughts. It got approved. Then within, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, somebody removed it, and then I screenshot it and said, hey, apparently some thought police don't believe in freedom of speech. Here's my, what my post that was removed, and eventually that got removed again. So this is why I think we need long form conversations, and we need people who are willing. I mean, whoever's listening, even if they don't have the courage to come on a podcast and discuss this, I'm sure we're all open to having a conversation at the grocery store or wherever. You run into us, let's talk about it. I guarantee that we can find some middle ground, and we can look at this logically and probably come to the conclusion that we have much more in common than we don't. And this country, they've capitalized on divide and conquer. They get all of us to fight against each other. I mean, like I said before, we're on Team Human. Like, we're fighting for not just our rights and our kids' rights, but for every kid's rights and every kid's health, and every kid to avoid some long-term trauma or breathing in carbon dioxide or bacteria or mold. We're fighting for everybody. And when you decide that I have this fear, and now I'm going to push my beliefs on everybody else, that's when I have a problem, because it's like, you have the right to do what you want. I mean, I'm very libertarian when it comes down to that stuff. It's like, live and let live. It's like, you have the right to pursue happiness, as long as it doesn't get in the way with my right to pursue happiness, and we can all live together. I know the counter argument is, but you're putting us in danger because of blah blah blah. I think we've talked about how little danger we're actually putting anybody in. So I don't think that's a valid argument, especially, like I said, when because it's optional everywhere else in town. I have a hard time believing that, because there hasn't been any real consequences of it being optional in other places with older people. Why would there be some really significant consequences in schools? It just doesn't make any logical sense. So, and this is coming from somebody who barely graduated high school, and I can see that doesn't make any logical sense. But but yeah, thank you so much, Alex. I know you got to go, and I'm sure you got some preparing to do. We'll have to talk again sometime in the near future, and I don't know what's the next step, guys. I mean, are you guys positive? Are you negative? I know the survey went out. Do you think it's not going to matter? I mean, that's the other thing. It's not like they said that if the survey swung one way or the other, that it was going to impact their vote.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. I'm gonna head off after I say this, but I'm based on people I've talked to, I have faith that it will go our way. I am hoping that even if it goes our way, like if it goes our way, that they do vote against the mandate. I think that if it goes our way, the survey, Sarah will definitely flip her vote, based on what she said last night. But we still need one more vote. I don't think Lang or Kellier will, so I'm hoping on Mullen there. But I do have faith that they do the right thing if the survey came out our way. But yeah, thanks for having me. I'm gonna head off now.
Bye, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
I'm going to head off too, but I'll finish with a couple words. One of them being, I've been quiet for a very long time, and for me to be this outspoken over this, like you said, when it finally knocks on your door, like it did, and it hits home, then it's time for you to speak up. And I heard some things last night, and I guess I'm not as positive about this as Alex might be, or as hopeful, because I think obviously certain people have made it very clear where they stand, and they're not going to budge. And I don't care if Jesus himself came down and showed the proof. They're still not going to budge. There's some people that you will not get through to, no matter what kind of evidence or what kind of story you tell. And again, my story tonight was personal. I don't need to cite things from the internet to convey my message. And I know I'm not alone. I'm not the only one struggling with mental health. I'm not the only one struggling with kids who've had enough. So I'm using my own personal account, my own history, my own experience. And I think it's time that people recognize, again, the mental health aspect of this, the impact of that, instead of minimizing it constantly as though it doesn't exist, and that COVID is the big problem and mental health really isn't that big of a problem. It's time to fess up. It's time to step up for these kids, because right now there's a lot of people with no voice right now. And last night there was one comment that was made about watch for your kids, keep an eye on them, take care of them, be there for them. Unfortunately, that's not an option for some kids. They don't have anyone there. They could have a parent who's an alcoholic and they're all by themselves. They could have a grandparent taking care of them, and many of them are. So there are challenges that the school committee needs to consider, that not everyone has mom and dad at home and everything's perfect, and there's a dog in the backyard and a pool and everything. There's some kids living in some real crappy conditions that have nobody to advocate for them right now. And they have no one to talk to. There's no outlet whatsoever. And when I said last night, you guys are playing with fire, I meant that. I meant you are poking an animal that could erupt at any time. And when I say, okay, let's bring the counselors in, there's been a tragedy. They love to do that. We'll have counselors on site. Well, that means the tragedy already happened. So let's step up. Let's do what's best for these kids, and not just worry about COVID as though it's the only threat to these kids. And let's do the right thing. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be compassionate. I'm trying to be I guess I'm trying to be proactive in a way and do more for these kids before something does happen. And I told the school committee last night, I hope you're ready to live with the repercussions of whatever, institute restrictions you put on these kids. Now, let's just hope they don't shut down the schools, because that's going to create 10 times the problem. But again, I think we need to be logical. We need to not fear living and stop just existing. And, I'll leave on that, Ricky. And, I thank you for having me. I've been here a while, so I really appreciate it. And, let's just keep on doing what's right for these kids.
Yeah, and what I'm doing is because it's something I just thought of at the very end of the show, is I'm going to put the link to the school committee's website in the show description. So if anybody wants to email them and let them know your thoughts on mandating masks for children, feel free to email every single one of them. I know I get plenty of people who watch this all over Rumble, BitChute, people who download this. Please take the time to go into the show description, click on that link, and use and exercise your First Amendment right of freedom of speech and protesting something that isn't just. I mean, that's why this country is as great as it is, because when there was tyranny, we fought back, and we stood up against that. And but thank you so much, Louis. I really appreciate the time. I'll send you the links to the show and stuff once it's up and available everywhere. And have a great night, Louis. I really
Thanks.
Hey.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you. So I think Louis is gone, and it's just me. So yeah, just final thoughts. Go into show description, email, find a link to the committee, email them, let them know what your thoughts are. If you agree with us, disagree with us, let them know about all that. And really do your part in trying to create a little bit of a stir and get some more attention on what I think is really unfair, and that's forcing all children to wear masks in a town where they don't have to wear them anywhere else and they're not at risk. So from the bottom of my heart, thank everybody who's tuned in. Thank everybody who listened. This show will be very shortly, within a day or so, available on iTunes and Spotify and all those locations. So make sure to subscribe to Ripple Effect Podcast, and in the show description will be links to all that stuff. And you can also go to rickyvrans.com or the rippleeffectpodcast.com to find all the interviews I've done with doctor after doctor after doctor. I have two of them that I just did last week and this week with Dr. Jessica Rose and Dr. Peter McCullen, which hopefully will be released also very soon. So keep a lookout for those. The Dr. Peter McCullen show was so information dense. I mean, he just is so intelligent. If you guys have heard him doing his rounds on all the shows and doing interviews, you know how intelligent and how much facts and information this guy has, and it's really hard to debate somebody who's that well researched. So that's it, guys. Have a great night.